Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Halal Gap. With Sofia Alani, I'm your host, Sikandar, and as always, we're joined by our talented producer, Asif. How's it going, man?
Great.
Amazing. I could feel that greatness in your voice. This is going to be good. It's going to be good. We have an incredible guest joining us today. Take it away, Sofia.
He is an award-winning host of many projects, including the very popular WNYC Studios podcast Radiolab, the miniseries The Other Latif, and the Netflix science documentary Connected. With his incredible talent for storytelling, his PhD from Harvard's History of Science department, and his love of asking questions, he has taken his audience on some incredible journeys through connection and the human experience. Born and raised in Canada and joining us all the way from Los Angeles, please welcome Latif Nasser.
Woohoo! Thank you. Extra thanks for the woohoo. Yeah, that was
Would have been requirement.
It is. You could have joined in if you wanted to woo yourself.
Thank you for the very kind introduction and the woohoo.
We had a brief debate before this as to whether we should say Canada or we should just be like more specific and say Mississauga, considering we're sitting in Canada.
Yeah. Where are you both?
We're in Edmonton.
Got it.
Yeah. But Sofia decided that we needed to be more collective in this approach. And so,
I was like, our droves and droves of international listeners won't know what Mississauga is.
Yeah,
so we've
fair.
got to keep it broad.
There was one time Barack Obama pronounced Mississauga. I don't know if you guys ever remember or noticed this, but he totally butchered the pronunciation. And it was still like all my relatives and friends and stuff were like, oh my God, he said Mississauga. Like they were just so happy.
Like, did he though?
Yeah, how did he pronounce it? How did he pronounce it?
I think it was like Mississauga or something. Like that. It was something like that.
He
it was
tried
bad.
to go a little more.
It wasn't close. Yeah.
That reminds me when like any politician tries to say like Assalamu alaikum or like Eid Mubarak at like any Muslim gathing. It's just like the most amazing, hilarious.
The only good one is actually Justin Trudeau. He sends videos to the Mosquers that we play at the beginning of our festival, and literally like every time it's like, wow, that was perfect execution, and every other politician is like, he must. He must. There's no way.
Like a linguistics coach or like a specific Muslim
like a culture Muslim coach.
Like a Muslim coach. Yeah,
and it's funny because like as I say that, as I'm like critiquing Barack Obama's pronunciation of Mississauga, I'm like, I'm bastardizing the pronunciation too. It's like some indigenous name that I'm like totally ripping off. Like, who am I? Anyway, whatever.
Yeah, we can't really sass him because maybe I don't know. I don't know what the correct pronunciation.
Maybe it is Mississauga,
but maybe it is Mississauga.
I know.
Who knows?
I know. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
You never know. First of all, congrats on the baby. I know if my math is correct, it's soon to be a year old. Is that
yesterday was his birthday? You were dead on. Yeah.
Whoa. Good math.
Yeah. So he is a year old and he is just the happiest, funniest little guy. He's just like a shot of pure joy.
Does he have your hair?
It's curly for sure. Whether he hasn't grown it out long enough. Yeah, right. It's like we haven't cut his hair, but it still hasn't grown out long enough.
That's amazing.
It's like waiting, and then at like 2 or 3, it's just going to be like, pah. That's what happened to me. I had hair, but it was just like short, and then like I think I turned like 3, and it was just like afro. Very similar to what you got going on right now.
But was it? Because I feel like sometimes baby hair is different from your adult hair, but it was your adult hair basically, or it was this?
It was no. I feel like this is like a little different. It was like fully yours.
Oh wow, fully mine.
Which I don't know if I cut mine to your length, if that's what it would look like.
Right,
but
fair.
You should definitely try.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with no.
Yeah, that would have been a great. Maybe it's too late. Maybe you should have done it for this interview. Is all I'm saying.
I really, and we could have been like, "Yo, hair twins."
Yeah, that would have been cool. That would have been cool. Not to say that. I mean, I appreciate this, but that would have been cool.
Way better.
Yeah,
way better.
I should have tried a little harder. Although we are twins in another way, because I'm also a Smiley, and I've heard on the grapevine that you are a Smiley.
I am a Smiley. So,
is that what we consider twins these days? In which case, I have like 800 million twins around the world.
We'll exchange the handshake later.
Yeah,
Don't
exactly.
worry about it.
Exactly.
Close my eyes.
Flag. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Right on. So we mentioned off the top, you grew up in Mississauga. We like to start right at the beginning with our conversations. And
great.
So tell us a little bit. Were you like a very curious child all the way from the beginning, or what was that upbringing like in Mississauga?
Yeah, I was not. I was a nerdy kid. I wasn't like at the top of my class or anything. Like I went to I went to mostly regular public schools. My dad parents are immigrants. Parents worked really hard. We were kind of middle class, but just hanging on. Like my dad, he didn't have enough money, but he wanted to send us both, my sister and I, it's just two of us, to private school. But he couldn't afford it. So he took a loan on the house, and it's crazy. What a crazy thing he did. He put my sister in private school for like 2 years. Then he would take her out and he'd put me in private school for 2 years. Then he would take me out and then he would put her. So he would just flip us. And so anyway, so I wasn't like the top. I was never really the top of my class, but I was like a kid who was pretty curious, I think. And I also, I did a lot of like extracurricular activities, and I was like, I really like, I love doing a lot of different stuff, and I was interested in a lot of stuff. And that was, I guess, like I was very, very, very lucky in my sort of situation growing up.
I was just going to ask, were you and your sister like relatively close in age as well, or?
She's 5 years older than me. And it's so weird because she also became we both became journalists, but like growing up, we didn't know any journalists. It wasn't a thing that was even on the horizon. Like one thing that is true is that my dad was kind of a news junkie when we were growing up, and like every morning, like he would, if we, depending on whether we went to Kane or not, he would burst into our rooms, my sister and I both, and he would have already read the whole paper, and he would just like burst into, and instead of an alarm, like what woke me up is like my dad summarizing all the stories of the day in the whole paper. And he would just be so excited about it.
That's amazing.
He got us excited about the news.
Yeah.
But it was just kind of one among many things that we sort of grew up doing. And we didn't, I don't know. It's just so funny because you always think of like, I feel like I see so often like people going into the same fields as their parents or going into kind of related fields. And it's like, for us, it was not that at all. And somehow both of us have ended up in this field that we didn't know anybody.
Yeah. We read that your dad used to encourage you and your sister not to be the smartest person in the room, but to just keep asking questions until your head hurts, basically.
Yeah, that was my dad's catchphrase. He was like, keep asking questions until their head hurts. And it's funny because I've been teaching, I have a 4-year-old too, and I've been teaching him that. And it's funny because it's such a weird piece of advice. Like he doesn't get it. He's like, why would I do that? And I probably had the same reaction.
That's a great question, though. Why would you do that? He's off to a great start.
Yeah, that's fair. Question fair. One. Good point. Good point. Yeah. He's really good. He's a really good question asker already. It's like invigorating. It's so exciting. One of his questions. Here's example of a question that he had months ago that I still think about, where I was teaching him about, like we were learning about, okay, octopus has 8 arms, like because he's into the octonauts and so then he was like, oh, is October the 8th month? And I was like, no, it's not.
But it's not.
You know what, though?
I had to think for a second. I'm like, no. Wait. It's 10. Okay.
Yeah. Apparently, because September is 7 and October is 8, November is 9. Apparently, they were all...
What are you talking about?
No.
September is 9.
No. I know. Work with me here.
September 7. Yes, I see what you're saying.
Sept, Oct, and No are like all those. And Des, right?
Yeah.
But so apparently they were in that order, and then was it Julius Caesar, whoever made the calendar, inserted July and August, and so they were actually supposed to be the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th month, but then July and August were slotted in there. Yeah.
Just confusing, just purposely confusing,
right? Like why?
Okay, this is we could go down. I have another whole. I have like 5 stories that this makes me think of, but I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole because I don't want to like hijack your podcast.
Please do.
I didn't know any of this. This is I feel like I'm listening to a Radiolab episode right now.
There's a great story that I learned when I was in grad school. Especially because of this great book by this guy, Ken Alder. But basically, it's the history of the meter. So the meter is such an interesting thing because it's like before the meter, there were all of these different measurements, right? Like, and it would be like a foot. And it's like, okay, whose foot? Like, everybody has a different foot. And it's like, okay, the king's foot. And it's like, which king's foot? Like, it's like, this is such a random, arbitrary thing. Like, why are we all measuring with one guy's foot? Like, it doesn't make sense. So the French Revolution happens, and then there are these kind of, Enlightenment philosophers who are like, we need a rational unit of measure. We need one that is like, that makes sense for everybody and that is universally true and is not based on some random person's foot. So they come up with this idea, which is like so crazy and so ambitious, and kind of impressively ambitious, which is they're like, we are going to measure the circumference of the entire Earth, and the measurement that we are going to use is going to be 1/10,000th of the circumference of the entire Earth. So it's like, that's what a meter is supposed to be, right? So they were so excited about it.
What year was this about?
This is like 18th century, like around the time of the French Revolution.
Got it.
So they go out, they actually send 2 guys out from Paris, one measuring north, because they're like, how do we measure 1/10,000th of the circumference of the Earth? So they send one guy out from Paris to measure north, to all the way to the north of France, and they send one guy out from Paris to measure south, all the way to the south of France. And so this is in the middle of like a revolution, and so these guys have all this machinery and technological equipment to do all these measuring, like surveying equipment and stuff, and everyone thinks they're spies. So they're doing their stuff, and then they constantly are like getting thrown in jail and stuff like that. So finally, they get these numbers, they submit the numbers, and one guy, he's literally submitting his numbers from a jail cell. And what he realizes is after he does it, I might be remembering some of the details wrong. Anyway,
whatever, man.
As he does it,
conviction.
Either way.
He realizes, he's like, oh no, I made a calculation error. I screwed it up. And he messed it up. And so then he sends it. But by that point, they had already cast at the French, Academy. They had made like a metal bar that was exactly a meter long according to those specifications. And that was the thing that was going to be a meter for forevermore. But it has this error baked into it. So the error, it's like a few slices of paper thick, only, but it's like it's like the attempt to make this, going back to the months thing, the attempt to make this very rational unit of measure that was universal and for everybody, again, became totally arbitrary, and it's like based on this one guy's mistake.
That's awesome. That's incredible how those things happen. I love that like other countries also were like, okay, we're down,
Yeah. Well, then what you realize is at the end of it, you're like, it actually doesn't, it's okay for it to be arbitrary as long as everyone agrees on
it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Right.
Yeah.
I feel like that's so cool.
You know what's funny is that we had a very similar tangent just like 2 episodes ago with someone completely non-science related about Celsius and Fahrenheit.
Oh yeah,
that's a good one. About Fahrenheit makes no sense. And
Celsius Fahrenheit makes no sense. Yeah, I live in the United States. I refuse to use Fahrenheit.
Same.
Yeah, what is the... No,
it's pointless. No. It's pointless. Anyway, okay. Coming back to your journey. Otherwise, this will become another Radiolab episode, which I'm cool with too. By the way,
we'll just listen to you talk the whole time. We don't even need to.
Yeah, exactly. So you grow up in Mississauga. At some point, you decide to go to Pearson College out in Victoria.
Yeah.
And
I mean, do you guys want the long story or you want the short story? Because we can do either way.
Hey, listen, we're on your clock, man. Let's go.
So the long story is I desperately more than anything else I ever wanted to do in my whole life was wanted to go to Pearson College.
Really?
Yeah. And I so badly wanted to go because I knew someone who went, and he was someone I really respected and he spoke the world about it. And I just wanted to go so bad. So I applied and I got rejected. And they had told me that I was on the wait list, which was like, but they also said they were like, no one's gotten off the wait list in like 10 years. So I was like, oh man. And so then what I did was my dad saw in the newspaper that Pearson College had like a summer camp program or something.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, so sign me up for that. Like, and it felt like a consolation prize or something, right? Like I was like, okay, fine, I'll go to that and whatever. At least it's like a tiny fraction of my dream. And then I went there, and what I did then is the principal of the school, the director is what they called him. He had an office. And I found his office, and then I just went every day to his office, and I knocked on his door, and I was like, "Hey, do you have any? I'm on the wait list. Like, do you have any spots opening up?" And then I just did that a bunch of times, and then eventually he was like, "Yeah, so a spot open, like miraculously, a spot opened up." And
or was he just like tired of you, and he was like,
"Yes, it could well have been. Could well have been. I don't know."
Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, that school really, I think that school really, more than any other school that I ever went to, that school sort of changed the trajectory of my life. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to go there. Like, and so for people who don't know what it is this magical school. It was, so it's in the most beautiful place, I think, on planet Earth, at the southern tip of Vancouver Island. It's so beautiful. And it's right on the ocean. Like, and when I say right on the ocean, it's right on the ocean. I had one of our class buildings was literally on the ocean. It was a floating building. And cool. So this school, it has 200 students from about 100 different countries. They were all there on full scholarship. And they were all like just the most interesting people you've ever met. And they were, I don't know. It was so exciting. And so it was like 2 years of that, of kind of boarding school, this kind of international boarding school with all of these different people. And all the extracurricular activities were like scuba diving and sailing and like just incredible stuff. Yeah. Anyway, it was sort of the experience, I think, that kind of like just it was also, and I think this is also true in general for like, not just for me, obviously, but like your first time away from home, you kind of, you realize you're like, well, what am I about? Like, I've just been doing what everybody else has been telling me to do all this time. And who am I? And what do I actually care about? And what do I actually want to do? And what do I actually want to, wear and think about, and how many times do I actually want to shower? That was a regrettable decision I made around that time. But but it was just like learning who you are, and I think that was for me the perfect place to do that, to kind of break myself down and build myself back up again.
Cool. And did you have like any really significant kind of like changes or like moments that you experienced with that breakdown that you were like, you kind of came back like fundamentally different in this way?
Yeah, there were some, like, I do think, I mean, just in general, like, it felt like, I mean, there were a few, but I think probably the biggest one is like, just in terms of like I was from Mississauga, like I was thinking a lot about Mississauga, and there's nothing wrong with thinking about Mississauga. It's like important, but then I got to meet all these people who had never heard of Mississauga, and who like all of a sudden I became much more interested in the world, and I became much more interested in like what is, I don't know, I like it gave me this sort of global perspective, whether I wanted it or not. Like I was like, whoa, like I don't know. Like it would be this thing where like all of a sudden after that, I would hear those same news stories from my dad or watch them on TV or whatever. And all of a sudden it wasn't about these other countries that were just like, up until then, just like arbitrary words. It almost felt like, but they were like, oh, I know a person from there. Like, and I know, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, the world like shrunk down in a way. And I was like, oh, I want to like I want this to be my playground. Like I want to do something on this scale. Like, and it's, I mean, it sort of sounds sort of pompous, to say, but like, I don't know, that school, it really kind of gave me this feeling that it's like, oh, like the world is an enormous place, but it's also just people, and it's also just like, and you can make a difference on this scale, actually, potentially.
And so you kind of had, so you, in this story with getting accepted into the school, you kind of, it seems like you kind of like carved out your place there and kind of like made it happen for yourself. And in your commencement, or not, yes, the commencement speech that you gave at Dartmouth, in like last spring, you kind of talked about that as well. And you had Doug, who mentioned also in his little piece at the end there that like you kind of have to be willing to change your plans, and you kind of have to be willing to like like go with the flow. But then your part was also like, but also like make the space for yourself, like find your niche and just like go with it. And so like is that where that started, or like how did that kind of come to be the philosophy of like your life?
Yeah, maybe. Like, I mean, I definitely, the things that I started doing at Pearson, that same question that I was asking before, like, it's like, okay, what do I actually care about? What do I actually want to do? And so then I went to when I went to undergrad, like the things that I was studying, the thing I studied more than anything in undergrad was theater. And it was a thing where I was like, okay, I'm just going to do this because this is fun and I like to do this. And I think that it's satisfying, which was not a thing. I mean, like, it's like, I feel like so many, if you went to a stereotypical like immigrant family and you're like, I'm going to go to a very expensive college and I'm going to study theater. Like, that's not a popular choice. But for me, I think it was like I was like, oh, okay, I'm, you only have one life. And I was like, okay, I'm just gonna make it about what I want to make it about, and who knows? I'm not really thinking so far ahead, but I am thinking about that thing. It's like, let's carve out your own space to be who you want to be and do what you want to do.
Mm-hmm. So it was Pearson College, because like you mentioned, you from there you went to Dartmouth to I think originally study playwriting, right?
Yeah.
And is Pearson more of like a, because I mean, just on paper from what I've read, it's a very like experiential, very like marine biology almost focused, very like, exposes you to a lot of things with a, you could see that if you were to go from there to like a more science forward, career path, it would make sense. It makes less sense to go from there to being a playwright.
Yeah.
So like, how did that happen? I mean, was that always kind of?
It's kind of, I mean, like academically, it's just a high school. So they did offer theater. I did take theater there, and I did take sciences there too. But it was a school where, like the one way in which it did kind of change my trajectory was like, was I saw all these other kids like getting into top schools, getting into Ivy League schools, getting into like the schools of their dreams and the programs of their dreams, where they were like, oh, I want to be a screenwriter. I'm going to go to whatever it is, USC or whatever it was. Like, it was like, oh, okay. So you could go anywhere you want from here. Like, or like, that's even a possibility. Like that idea, that was crazy to me. Like to me, the idea that I could have gone anywhere and that I wasn't just going to go to, like, probably the University of Toronto or like one of the other schools that was around like where I grew up that are really good schools. But like, I was like, I think I was probably on that track before then. And then I was like, no, I think I want something different. I think I want something totally different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because I probably had a similar experience way later in life, right? I did my grad school at NYU, and it's like it's one of those things where it's like when you're in that global context, you start the world, like you said, is simultaneously bigger and smaller at the same time, right? I wasn't 17 when I had that realization, though, so it's a bit of a different trajectory. But I could totally appreciate why you all of a sudden were like, "Oh my gosh, my eyes are open to like a world of possibilities of where I could go and how I can kind of pursue my next step in whatever my academic journey or whatever it is."
Yeah, and like for me that for that to happen at like 16 or 17, in a way, I think I was so much more like anything is like I had no sense of how many ways I could fall flat on my face. You know what I mean? Like it was like, oh, I could do anything. And like, so yeah.
So were you drawn more to like theater, or were you more drawn to the writing aspect?
The writing aspect. I wanted to be a writer so bad. I loved writing. I loved thinking about, and the thing I liked about playwriting is like I liked writing in other people's voices, and I really loved. I loved this is like such a weird nerdy reference. I loved like George Bernard Shaw's plays because like the idea is that it's like they're like issue plays. So you could like take an issue and you could use different characters to be different perspectives or arguments on that issue. And then they're not really characters as much as they are like people's voices. And for me, that was like a really helpful way to think through issues in the world, to be like, oh, okay, let's make a little like diorama where here's an issue that's like feels so big and a lot of people are facing, and it's clearly a really big deal. And you know, and I seem to be gravitated towards, but kind of ambivalent about, and I don't know how to feel about. And it's like, okay, let me just like make up pretend people and give them these different POVs and like let them duke it out. And they're duking it out on the page. And I'm their puppet master, but like I don't know what they're gonna say next. And like I don't know who's gonna win the argument. And I don't know. And so like to me that was really thrilling. Like it was a really helpful and clarifying way to think. And that for me was very appealing. Because it's just the world is so complicated. And then if you can if you can pin a certain thing down to a certain character, you're like, oh, this is like, it's helping me process it all.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant. I might try stealing that and just start writing plays. Because I feel like sometimes I'm like, wait, how do I feel about this thing? Or like, how do I like you said, like kind of diminish it to like a digestible, understandable piece of like information or an opinion.
Yeah.
That's so cool. So because you have like such an incredible narrative style in the podcast that you do and in the miniseries that you did and even on the show. And it was so funny because I read that you did your TED Talks and then that's how you kind of got asked to do the Netflix show Connected. And it's so funny because I think I read that you were like, I don't know how that happened. And I was like, it's because your delivery was like so excellent. Like it was very captivating. And I feel like I would want to watch a show being presented in that way. And so like when you do that narration, like do you have like, is that your voice or like, do you kind of switch between like all the different like, are you creating a character or is it you?
Well, it is funny because at Radiolab, like I still do that, right? Like I'm still kind of making little dioramas and using other people's voices. They happen to be real people now instead of fake people, but I do get to write and talk with other people's voices. Like I did that in my TED Talk too. Like it's like using somebody else's voice as a way to, I don't know, to me it just helps clarify. Like maybe if I was a better writer, I could do it all by myself. But having other voices, like it really does help to clarify. And actually, when you were talking about like sort of narrative and like sort of like wanting to hear something, there's a thing that I remember I still use from something I learned at Pearson in my theater class at Pearson. Which is my theater teacher. She would talk about the janitor test. So the janitor test was this thing, and like she was like, okay, if you were, and this I think she was saying it for actors, but it works for playwrights, it works for kind of anybody, I think. So let's say you're like rehearsing, and the theater is empty, and you're just rehearsing. You're on stage and you're rehearsing, and there's a janitor who's in the next room or in the hallway or whatever, just like mopping up, and you need to be good enough, compelling enough, like personal enough, authentic enough, raw enough, like interesting enough that janitor drops the mop and walks and pokes his or her head through the door and be like, what is going on in there? And it's like, that's the thing. Like, I feel like you want every moment of a story to pass the janitor test, to pass the like, and actually it literally happens, which is to say like now it's the, scanning through the radio frequencies test in a way. It's like, oh, if someone stops on this for 1 second and on whatever their public radio station is, like you want them to need to stay on the dial, anyway.
So I have like two questions on that. Number one, is it hard to be like that compelling 100% of the time in anything that you create? Because if you're only going to get that snippet and you don't get to pick when the janitor or the person on the radio is tuning in, then every part needs to be like vibing at 100 for that to be that interesting. So like that's first question. And then number two is like, we have a lot of artists who come on who are like comedians and actors and, musicians and everything that where you're creating art in this way that is like part of like telling a story in a very specific, captivating way. And so for our listeners who are interested in that, like, do you have any advice for like, how do you take a story? Because you've also said that like you can take anything, and if you just tell it the right way, it will be a good story. It'll be interesting. So like, do you have any advice for that?
Yeah, sure. So for the first thing, it is, to me, actually, in a way, there's both of those answers. In a way, you can go take them in the same place, which is that I think it's like a lot of it is time. Like, so I don't do what you guys do, which is to say, like, it's an interview show. So like, it's a conversation. It's a natural conversation, and you're going to edit it, which thank God, because there are going to be so many boring things that I say. But no, but. To me, I have the luxury of like, I can work on a story for a long time and I'm distilling it down. It's like a perfume or something, right? Like, it's like how many jasmine little blooms will it take to make like an ounce of perfume? Like many, many, many of them, right? And so in a way, like story-wise, we're doing the same thing. We're like distilling down. So it's like, I will do a 90-minute interview and I will take like a minute and a half from it or something, right? Like, and so it's like distilling down and trying to make something that's sort of in its essence, like that will catch you at every moment. And you can't catch everyone at every moment, but like you can try to do it, and you can, you can kind of just, it's like going over it again and again and again and again. It's like such a weird analogy, and I've already made like 2 analogies in this one answer. But like a bobsled run or something. Like, it's like you're just going over it again and again, and you're like thinking about, okay, that turn right there, that turn. How do I reduce the drag of that turn? This plot point here. What if I move that over here? Then it actually goes way more smoothly, and it's way more dramatic and compelling if I do that. Like, it's like that kind of thing. It's like that sort of thinking.
Yeah, wow. Okay. No, I could completely appreciate that in terms of like, you're not necessarily trying to create that, like, not every interview has to be, every second of it has to be that captivating moment, but you want to make sure that there's at least enough captivating moments to, in its accumulation, have a 90-minute show or a 60-minute show or whatever that requires, that has that. That's fascinating. But like, it just goes to show how many hours go into each moment. You know what I mean?
Oh my God,
like,
I'm so jealous of you guys and of the interview podcasts out there, including and especially like the like a little hesitant to say it, but like of the Joe Rogans and the like it
who does like a 4-hour interview.
It takes them an hour to make an hour. It takes me like a year to make an hour, a year, and they just make an hour. And like you guys do some editing, so I don't know exactly how much, but still, like
very little.
Very little
disclosure. Very little.
So then you guys are in the same camp. I'm very jealous.
100%.
Like so for me, it's we're sort of trying to make different things, and in a way, it's much easier to make something that's so distilled down, and it's
Okay, so I have like a very weird question.
Sure.
So like, if this is too weird, like feel free to be like, what, Sophia, and just ignore me. But okay, so you were talking about perfume.
Yeah.
Which made me think of the movie/book Perfume, which is the story of a murder.
Yeah.
And
I think I saw the movie. I didn't read the book. But anyway.
I also only saw the movie and did not read the book.
So was that the tagline? This is a story about murder?
It's called Perfume, the story of a murderer. Yeah. And it's basically this guy in like 18th century Paris who is so obsessed with like the smell of this woman that he tries to recreate it and ends up like murdering women and like taking their scent from their skin. And it's very creepy. Beautifully made, actually.
Yeah, beautiful but creepy.
Super creepy. Yeah. And so my question about
are you murdering women and making perfumes out of them by any chance?
Listen, do we need to call the 5-0 right now? No, so like in your quest to like create art and have everything you make be so different and yet be using the same recipe for it almost, or like at least a similar recipe. Like, do you ever find yourself kind of getting to that place of like where you're stuck in the creative process of like, how do I recreate the magic and the beauty of the one thing that I'd made before or like that I had before? Or are you like always excited about the next project?
Well, it's a really good, it's actually a great question. I think the, because I do think like I do follow generally, and it's one I learned in like playwriting as an undergrad. Like I do generally use the same recipes. Stories have shapes. They have like characters work, like character works a certain way. Like stories have arcs, and and plot twists, like they can only twist so many ways. You know what I mean? So I do think that there is a kind of a recipe. It's a very, very, there's so many ways that it can go. But I do, part of it for me, the fun is, it's actually not so much like, can I capture the glory of a past story, or can I get that same kind of lightning in that same kind of bottle in a way? It's like, oh, what new weird thing can I try this time? Like, how can I, what if, okay, the shape is like this, but like, what if I like put a little kink in the curve right there? Or what if I start with this part instead of that part? Like I'm doing that right now. I'm like storyboarding an episode, like just before I got on, which is why I was late, which I apologize again. Yeah, it's like storyboarding is so much fun. It's like a puzzle. It's like puzzling it out. And to me, the fun is like, okay, so I've done this before. So how do I mess it up? And that's like, that'll keep it fresh and fun for me, but it'll also keep it fresh and fun for the listener, I think, I hope.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I'm just thinking now as like an organization, as the Mosquers Film Festival, we're entering our 15th year, and it's the same thing, right? It's like every year it's thank you very much. But no, but it's one of those things where it's like every year, at the end of the day, you're doing a screening of finalist films and making awards. But the question is, how do you make it captivating to an audience every year in a unique way, right?
Yeah.
And so it seems like it's a very similar thought process.
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think the fun is like, if you're getting bored with it, someone else out there is going to be getting bored with it.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
So just going back to like your transitions, right? We talked about how you started off wanting to be kind of very focused in theater and as a playwright, and then somewhere along the line, I assume at Dartmouth, or maybe shortly after, you decided to instead kind of pursue more research in academia. Was the plan always to kind of learn academia and research, utilize the playwriting skills and create something, or was that a full pivot at the time?
I think you're giving me a lot more credit than
too much credit
than I had. Yeah, there was not a lot of foresight. I mean, I did feel like I wanted to be a writer. Yeah. And I did feel like I needed something to write about because I didn't know anything. And the other thing that happened was I graduated from college in 2008, and there was the financial crash. And basically what happened was I was like, I don't want to go try to get a job. I have a degree in theater. This is not going to go well. And I applied to playwriting grad schools, and they didn't take me. And so I was like, what do? I don't know what to do. And I had been working as a research assistant for this one professor at Dartmouth who was really, really wonderful guy. And he was like, why don't you just apply to the program I did? And I was like, oh, what program is that? And he's like, the history of science. And I barely knew what the history of science was. I didn't have a background in history. I didn't have a background in science. Like I was not the prime candidate for this program. But he was like, look, like, you know what, like you've done all this work for me, like just try it out. And like all those things felt interesting. And I was like, oh, okay, like I think I could do that. And he also gave me this other piece of advice, which is a really smart piece of advice, which I still give to people all the time, which is that in academia, what I wanted to do is just like go in just for like a year or something. But he was like, look, if you apply for the master's program and get in, you have to pay them. But if you apply for the PhD program and get in, they will pay you. And then you can drop out a year or two in, and they will give you the master's for free.
Life hack, man. Life hack right there.
Genius. So I was like, okay.
Does that apply to every school or just?
I think most grad programs, yeah.
Okay.
So I applied to the PhD program, fully intending to drop out. It was like basically I was just trying to weather the storm until I could apply to playwriting grad school. So I got in this program, which was itself a sort of miracle that I think I credit to my professor who sort of helped usher me in. and his recommendation letter. But anyway, I get into this program, and I got there, and I totally fell in love with it. I really, really had such a good time. It felt like it was this kind of nerdy, obscure field, the history of science, that like nobody had ever heard of or thought was even a discipline. But then when I got there, I was like, wow, this is actually a universe. Like there's so many things here. There's so many stories. There's so many interesting people and ideas and books and, you know, arguments and like there's just so much. And just questions everywhere. And I was like, oh, these are really good questions that never occurred to me. And so I was really excited about that. And that's basically, I every year I was there, I was like, okay, dropping out next year, going to drop out, next year, going to drop out, cash in, get that MA, you know? And then I didn't, I finished the PhD. I like took me like 5.5 years. But I got the PhD. And yeah, it was sort of despite myself in a way.
So two things. Number one, I'm going to give you more credit than you're giving yourself in terms of foresight, because in 2008, we have it on record, you saying the most insightful art for me is the kind that connects things that aren't connected.
Oh, and wow. I said that
12 years later, you make a show called Connected. So
wow.
I don't know, maybe you knew something.
Maybe. Wow. Good research. That's, I'm very impressed.
There you go. That's all on Asif right
well
there.
Done, Asif. Well done.
But we're going to give you some foresight credit there. But
yeah, no, that's it's true. I do. I have always liked that. There's something satisfying about connecting the dots. You know, there's something really satisfying about that. And and so I've tried to make a living off of it, I guess.
And so when you were at, by the way, subtle name drop, you went to a little school called Harvard to do your PhD in the history of science.
True.
You did your dissertation on something called the Tanganyika laughter epidemic.
Yeah.
What and why?
Okay. So I was in grad school. I had a bunch of interests that didn't feel like they matched up at all. I was interested in the history of medicine and the history of public health. I was interested in the history of like East Africa around the like time of independence, which was like when my parents grew up, and I grew up hearing stories of them growing up. I don't know if that's true for you too, Sofia. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I was interested in that sort of time and place. I was interested in like the history of medicine, the history of public health. I was also interested in the history of social science. Anyway, so I had a bunch of like kind of weird, different interests. And I was like I was casting around for something to write a dissertation about. And then I found this Wikipedia entry, which was just like a stub of a Wikipedia article. And it was like the Tanganyika laughter.
I read it earlier and I was like,
oh, is it still a stub? Have they?
It's not much.
Yeah, it's not much.
I was like, I'll need to read your dissertation. So like send that to me, please.
Yeah. I think
so
I'm
fascinating.
Pretty much the only person who's ever written about that. And so that's actually that part of it. Like part of the idea of writing a dissertation is like you have to make an original contribution to knowledge. You have to do something and discover something original. And so I was like, oh, easy. I'll just find something nobody else has ever cared about, and I will research that. And it is all inherently an original contribution to knowledge. But also, this sounded really interesting. So what it was a kind of a mysterious epidemic of like uncontrollable laughing and crying. And it was mostly young people, mostly young girls who were kind of getting this, and it seemed to be spreading like a kind of like a psychic contagion. And at the time, everybody was very baffled by this. And they basically they started with kind of like it was the outbreak in quotes started at this Swedish Lutheran boarding school in basically the middle of nowhere in northwestern Tanzania, and then it sort of spread. And so first it was like the school nurse, and then it was like the district medical officer, and then it was like, and it went all the way to the World Health Organization, where they were like, "What the heck is this thing? What is happening here?" And it was this giant epidemic, and it was like on the front page of the New York Times, and the front page of maybe not front page of the New York Times, maybe front page of Chicago Tribune, probably. Anyway, it was on the front page of a bunch of papers, and then it just vanished. And it was like this just bizarre thing. And what happened? And so I got super interested in that. And then I did like years of research on this story to be like, what happened there? And I did all kinds of original.
Do we get to know?
Well, yeah. I mean,
do you have to read your paper? Like, what's going on here?
The short answer is there's not really a smoking gun kind of an answer, but in a way, like the argument that I make is in the dissertation is that it had a lot to do with this very kind of like pregnant moment in the history of this country, like this transition moment. And it was this transition moment of this country. It was this transition moment in the lives of many of these young people. They were sort of between, they were, anyway, it's like, basically it was this kind of emergent psychological condition, that the terms that I remember all the sort of cultural psychiatrists using were like idioms of distress. This was like this local idiom of distress. And and it was kind of a cry for help. And it was sort of, the story was funny, but it was also very sad and kind of strange.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow. Wild.
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy you were able to shine a light on.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, it was a kind of a, I don't know why.
Did you get a chance to like visit the?
Oh
area?
yeah, I spent oh man, I made I don't know how many, like 3 or 4 trips to Tanzania.
Oh, wow.
Because a lot of the people were like Swedish, so there was like a lot of. I did a bunch of trips to Sweden, and I did a bunch of trips like all over. All these like missionary, I went to the WHO. I went to all of these places to do research for this dissertation. It was a tremendous amount of research.
Yeah, I feel like you can't half-ass your Harvard PhD.
No, you really can't. You really can't. You really can't. I mean,
it's like
there are people out there.
Yeah, you're like, I don't know. The Wikipedia page was short. That's all I got.
Yeah, right. Yeah, if there are people out there, whether you're a Harvard PhD student or a PhD student somewhere else, and you want to find ways to cut corners and half-ass it, I have a lot of advice, but that I didn't take, and that maybe I should have. But anyway.
Oh my god! So changing gears a little bit, but we read that it wasn't until you were at Harvard that you first listened to a podcast.
That's right.
That was your first exposure to podcasts in general. Do you remember what podcast it was? And what about it drew you to?
Oh yeah, no, I remember exactly what podcast it was because, well, first of all, let me say, like at that time, like nobody knew what a podcast was.
Yeah,
like I don't think any of my fellow grad students or my professors or anybody, like nobody was listening to podcasts. Podcasts were the thing where it was like if it's not good enough to go on the radio, like put it on the web. Like it's like that's what a podcast was
for free. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. And so the podcast I heard, it was while I was doing research on my dissertation topic. I was like, wait a second, this show called Radiolab did a segment about the thing that this super obscure thing that I'm doing my dissertation on. What is Radiolab? And then that's how I first heard Radiolab, and that's how I heard this sort of podcast, segment that they did, and I was like, oh, that's like not bad actually. So I kind of I really fell in love with it. But basically the thing I love, like I'm not, a lot of people I work with, they're really kind of like audio nerds. Like they're maybe musicians, or maybe they grew up on, public radio, and they, know all the names of all the people. Like that was not me at all. To me, the thing that grabbed me into this field was Radiolab, and specifically the hosts of the show. They just had like a sensibility that I really liked. Like they were funny and smart and sometimes sad and sometimes insightful, and like they were kind of all of these things. Like it was all in one package, and I was like, oh, that feels like my personality. Like I would make something like that. And so that was kind of nice. Like I was like, oh, this feels like they feel like these like kindred spirits in a way. And I felt that, and I was like, who knows if they'll feel like that. And so I ended up this is probably, I'm guessing where you're going to go next, but I'll anticipate it. So I heard that they did this segment on the laughter epidemic, and I was like, oh wow. So I called them up, and I was like, hey, like, can I? And I called up. I forget whether I emailed or cold called the like producer of the laughter epidemic, who happened to be the executive producer of the show. And executive producer just meant there were like 3 people working on the show, and she was one. And I was like, hey, can you, like, what did you find out about the laughter epidemic? Like, tell me everything in case you found out stuff that I haven't found out. And also, by the way, I have a whole bunch of other stories here. Like, do you want to do stories on any of these other things? And she rejected all of my ideas. But she was like, but like, even though they're not good, like they're, I've never heard them before, and that's good. And so why don't you keep trying to pitch us? And so that's basically what I did. I kept pitching them, and getting rejected. And then until finally one time I didn't. And, and they did one of my stories, and then they did another one. And then I around that time I was also, anyway, but basically it was like I felt like that transition, it just so happened that Radiolab just so happened to do that story on that topic that I already was looking at. And then that was my gateway into podcasting and Radiolab.
Whoa. So what was the story that they first said yes to from you?
Yeah, so the story they first said yes to from me was a story about, they were doing an episode about robots, and they were like, pitch us stories about robots. And I was like, okay. So I was looking around for stories about robots, and I found this story. It was from the person who had written it up was a sculptor, a sculptor who had been a friend of mine who was an art student at Dartmouth. It was her. She had studied with her. So I like kind of had this peripheral connection to this sculptor. And the sculptor, she had written about this robot, this like medieval robot, and it was a praying robot. It was a monk. It was a robot shaped like a monk, and you would like wind it up, and then it would pray. It would like have a little rosary, and it would do like be crossing itself, and it would be it was a praying robot. And it's in the Smithsonian. It's still in the Smithsonian. You can go and see it. And so I was like, I have never heard of such a thing. And all of a sudden I'm very interested to hear it more. So she had written a little thing in an anthology, in a scholarly anthology. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. And I've never heard this story before. So I pitched that story, and we did it. And they interviewed me, and then we together interviewed her, and we went to the Smithsonian to see the real thing. And and it was a good story. Like I look back on it, and I'm like, I don't even like I would have done it so many different ways, but like it's a fun story. It's a really I don't know. It's like, you know how you look on your, I mean, I'm sure you guys look at like the first episode you did of this podcast, and you're like, what were we thinking? But it's sort of the same way. Like I'm like, oh, I would have done that differently, but like it's nice. It's like a sort of a time capsule in a way.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Cool.
So how did you then, I mean, from the PhD, you joined Radiolab full time? Was that just you slowly pitching more and more ideas until finally they're like, okay, look, just join us full time? Or how did that come about?
Kind of. Well, what happened was my girlfriend at the time, now wife, was living in New York City. So I was at, as you said, Harvard. In Boston. But then what I would do is I would like take the bus up to be with my girlfriend. And then at some point I was like, whatever, I'm just going to live in New York. So then I lived in New York, and I was working on my dissertation every day at the New York Public Library. I would go every single day to the New York Public Library, and I would work. And it was very, 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 very cold. And it was very, 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 very lonely. And I was like, I would just be sitting there all day by myself. And there would be like just homeless people all around me. And I was just like, I don't know. It was just like it was a hard time. It was a hard and kind of lonely time. And I think that's the, I think that's the experience for a lot of people in graduate school. Like they get very lonely, and especially when you're working on a PhD, like you're just all by yourself. You feel like you're totally marooned. And even though I had like great, colleagues and professors and whatever, like you're so alone in writing. And so I was, so I would be like by myself standing at the same table, like at the New York Public Library every day. And then Radiolab, like I would pitch stories to them, and they'd be like, yeah, you want to come in and talk about it? And I'd be like, yes, please. And I would go and I would talk about it with them. And yeah. And then eventually like, they'd be like, oh, do you like, you're working on this story anyway. Like, do you want to just come to the meeting about, this production meeting or whatever? I'm like, sure. And so then gradually I would stay for that meeting, then I would stay longer and I would just hang out and I would talk to everybody and I would just like distract them from their work. And then they'd be like, do you want to come to the pitch meeting? And I'd be like, sure. And then I just basically was working there without even working there. And then, and then at some point they offered me a full-time job.
So you join as director of research, but eventually you kind of have worked your way from that to production to actually being a co-host. Was the idea always to try to get more into the hosting and kind of the behind the mic type stuff, or were you kind of just going with the flow? How did that all happen? It was a kind of I felt like sort of a natural progression. Like the first time when I pitched this story, and the first time even when I got that story like through, and they were like, yeah, we like it. Like I was so used to hearing no's, like I didn't know what to do when I got a yes. Like I didn't know that I was going to be reporting it. I didn't know that I was going to do interviews. I didn't know anything. I was just like, do this story, do this story, do this story. And then they're like, okay, we're going to do this story. And actually you're going to do this story. And I was like, I don't know how to do a story. So it really was like, I had no idea. I had zero audio experience. I had no clue what I was doing. And they sort of just walked me through it. And I did it, I did a little bit the first time. I did a little more the next time, a little more the next time. And then like, it just sort of, it was like reps, it's just like doing it over and over and over again. And not just on my shows, or on my stories. Like, it's like I was fact checking other people's stories. I was, doing the web copy for this other story. I was booking this other interview for this other thing that I had nothing to do with. Like, and it was like, just the more I did, the more I was learning and the more I was kind of building my skill set in this world. And still, not to say like there's so many parts of this business that I know nothing about. I'm terrible at, but but like finding the sweet spot for me, like I love finding new ideas. I love interviewing people. I love like getting to tell people about it, like whether it's on the mic or just in general. And so it's like, those were kind of the areas where I gravitated towards. And then those were the things that I ended up doing more and more and more on the show.
Cool. So one of the really wonderful recent mini-series that you have done, which I'm sure you've probably talked about to death on other podcasts, so please just humor us anyway.
No.
Is the Other Latif. And so do you want to tell, if I'm sure people listen to it already, but just in case they haven't, did you want to tell them what it's about?
Sure. So the kind of brief summary is that I found out that there was a guy with my same name who was a detainee at Guantanamo Bay, and that he had been there for, when I discovered him, he had been there for over a decade and a half, without charges, without a trial, tortured, and even weirder, he was actually cleared to go on paper. He was like, the U.S. government had basically said, okay, you can go home. And yet he was still stuck there. And he was in this sort of bizarre legal, like even Guantanamo itself is kind of a legal black hole. And then he was he was in a black hole within a black hole. And so I found out about this guy and I was like, who is this guy? And then I was like reading around about him. The only reason I got clued into him is because someone was tweeting about him and I thought they were tweeting about me. But then,
so were you just like Googling yourself, or did you just happen to come across
mentions?
This?
Yeah,
it was just in my feed. Like I was following this not-for-profit law firm because of a different story that Radiolab had done like years before. And then they were tweeting about me, and I was like, "What are these people? Why are they tweeting about me like to the president of the United States?"
I love that they thought that the other Latif Nasser had a Twitter account, which was like you.
Oh yeah, no, I mean,
at Latif Nasser.
Yeah, it was so weird. It was like it like I like stopped in my tracks, and I was like, "What are they saying about me?" And then and so I like nobody had like. Besides basically his lawyer and then like one activist, like nobody had written about this guy. And I was like, how has this been this long and nobody's paying attention to this guy? And so like, and this is not my field at all. Like I'm much more comfortable in the worlds of science, in the world of like, I don't know, just weird things in culture or whatever. But then all of a sudden I was like, oh, okay, this is this national security story, and I guess I have to do it because nobody else is gonna.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Was that kind of the motivation behind, like, okay, I need to tell the story to the world? And did you go to Radiolab right away about this? And was the intention to do a one-off episode, or how did that turn into because it was the first serialized project for Radiolab, right? So
first serialized in the true sense of like cliffhangers and one big story over a long, The way that happened is I pitched it. So I first discovered this guy. I did a tiny bit of research into him, which was basically all I found was the U.S. government saying in leaked documents saying like, this guy's the top explosives expert for Al-Qaeda, and his defense attorney saying, no, he wasn't even in Al-Qaeda. He was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. And so I was like, okay, something is wrong here. These both can't be right. And so I did basically that much research. I pitched it to Radiolab. And basically it was like, nobody was excited about it. Everyone was like, look, like injustice at Guantanamo Bay is not surprising. Like this would have been a news story like 15 years ago. And B, you don't have access to the main character. Like you've run out of reporting road. Like where are you going to go from here? Right. So I pitched it as one episode, and then it was like crickets basically. And then I was very lucky that I had one producer and later two producers at Radiolab, Susie Lechtenberg and Sarah Kari, who were like, no, there's potential here. Like, just keep with this, stick with this. And I was kind of doing it anyway, just in my free time, because I was just obsessed with this guy. But they were like, no. Not only is this not one episode, this is 6 episodes. And here, let's make it a series out of it. And here's how we're going to do it. And we kind of just the 2 of us, and then later the 3 of us, just like were, in so many rooms, just like banging our heads together about like, how could we find out about this guy? Because in a way, it became at some point like a kind of like all of these Guantanamo guys, how many Guantanamo guys can you name off the top of your head? Like none, right? Like maybe Khalid Sheikh
Omar
Mohammed.
Khadr?
Right. Oh, yeah, Omar Khadr, but that's after the fact, like after he got released. Right?
No, exactly.
Yes,
Like how many of these guys could you name off the top of your head? And it's like almost none, because they are ghosts. Like they erase them. They're in this category where I think it's called Born Secret, where like everything. This guy, Abdul Latif Nasser, everything he said out of his mouth, the minute he said it, it's classified. Like it's inherently classified. Everything about him, every detail of his life, it's all classified. And so to me, it was like, it's like these people had been erased. And then all of a sudden I had gotten sort of a tiny scrap of this guy's life, 2 tiny scraps, which contested each other. And I was like, I need to know more about this guy. And I couldn't, because he had been erased. And I was like, all of a sudden I was like, okay, now I need to know. And it feels kind of, it feels like there's a kind of a human dignity to like having a story. And this guy just doesn't have that. And how do I, and so we went on this sort of quest to like find this guy's story in a way.
There was a night where you're at the Emmys where you couldn't stop thinking about Abdul Latif Nasser, and what was it specifically that made you so compelled? Yeah. Like obviously the name is how you kind of got exposed to it, but was there something of, like, and again, you just mentioned that human aspect of bringing light to people within Guantanamo more generally, but was there anything particular about his case that really drew you to it, or was it more so what it represented in terms of Guantanamo Bay?
It just felt so absurd, and it felt so kind of like, it felt so medieval. Like it felt like that was not a story that happens in modern times. And by modern times, I mean like after the Magna Carta. The idea that there was a guy who was taken away, who was not charged or tried, and was tortured, and was like had his sort of personality erased, and that he may be innocent, he may be guilty, we don't know, but he's been cleared on paper. He's actually a free man on paper, but we're still keeping him there. Like, what kind of a world is it where that happens? And so for 3 years or 4 years or however long I've been reporting this story, like I just stop it multiple times during the day, every day. And I'd be like, he's still there. What is he doing right now? Like, I can't even interview him. I can't even, like, he was this ghost to me. And that absence in a way became I don't know, it sort of became compulsive, where like you just need to know more, because you're like, all I know is that this guy has my name, and that he's been erased, like he's been ghosted from like the modern world, and I think a part of that too is this feeling of like being a Muslim American. Like at the moment, at that time, I was like going through my citizenship process. Like, could this happen to me? If it happened to a guy with my name, could this have happened to me? Like, and like, how is this even possible in, I don't know, in the modern world? And could it happen to me? Like, I think that was like way deep down, those were sort of the things
like,
that,
when there's no rhyme or reason to it, like how
no rhyme or reason. It's felt like no rhyme or reason.
Yeah, no, and if someone hasn't heard the series, I would highly recommend that, go listen to it, because it is very much this very personal journey almost that you take us on in not just like about this, the other Latif, but about your journey in trying to find information about the other Latif, right? And I can only assume that as you got deeper and deeper into it, that there was, or maybe I should ask the question, did you start to develop more of like an emotional attachment to this individual at all? Even though, like you said, you couldn't even interview him at the time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, was that like this odd paradox where you're getting emotionally connected to this individual that really is a stranger in every other way other than sharing a name? Yeah.
And like, for all I knew, could have been this guy who like committed terrible, heinous things.
Totally.
And yet, like, I there was no way to know. There was no way to know who this guy was, but even if he was, like, still the way he had treated seemed wrong, and something seemed wrong here. Right. And so there was this kind of like I did have this emotional connection, and as you said, like, I did sort of put myself in the story, which, like, over my 10 years as a journalist, like, I basically did not do that on purpose. Like, I hate that kind of thing. I hate like the like confessional, like I just don't want that. And I didn't want that. And I also, actually, to be honest, like, I also kind of hate the like Muslim terrorist, like, kind of a vibe. Like, I really am allergic to that too. And I didn't want either of those things. And yet this story, I don't know, it just sort of grabbed me in such a way where I was like, I got to do this, and hopefully I can do this in a way that doesn't feel like either of those things. And yet, like will feel true both to his situation and as far as I can ascertain it, which was like, based on these scraps of information, but also true emotionally for me. Like, I feel like I was honest to some degree, to a large degree, I think, in the podcast, that, like, in a way, just the name coincidence and all these other similarities that I had with him, like I was kind of pulling for him to be innocent, but then, like, that was not always so true. And it was at certain times it sort of strains credulity to stick to that position. And so like, I think I was sort of like emotionally honest, as well as sort of like more factually, like, reporting honest, or at least I tried to be, and we tried to be, me and the team that made it. But yeah, it was a hard story, and it was a more personal and emotional story than any other I've done on Radiolab or in my career, really.
And so, like, you were mentioning that, so this was released in 2020, but you had been working on it for a few years before that.
That's right.
And so when you were making the show, just in terms of like how it was received and stuff, like, number one, like, what was that like? But then also, like, with COVID and everything, like, was there an element of, because you were making this show for an audience that was now going through something completely unprecedented and unexpected, and so, like, did that affect it at all?
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember the exact dates, but it was like around February, March when we were releasing the episodes. It was like 6 weekly episodes, and so it was like, I think it was, if I'm remembering right, the final 2 episodes, like, our listenership dropped, because it was like all of a sudden you could very distinctly notice, like, everything just went into lockdown. People are even people who are like following the series, like I felt like for those first few weeks, like I felt like a drug dealer or something. Everyone would be like texting me or emailing me being like, when's the next episode coming out? And we'd be late a few days and people were like, where's the episode? Why haven't you released the episode? Everybody wanted to hear it. And then all of a sudden, like the last 2 weeks, like it's like it just dropped off. Like people clearly, you know, their works were shutting down, their kid care was unavailable, their, you know, parents they were worried about, their this or that, their, you know, how are they going to get groceries? Like all of these things just sort of swamped their lives and mine too. And so it just became, COVID sort of like just took over everybody's minds. Not to say that we didn't like. The series wasn't very well received, and we were really lucky that people actually listened to it and got some coverage and but it did feel like it was noticeable. Like it was like the last 2 weeks, all of a sudden, just a lot less people were paying attention for, you know, totally understandable reasons.
And so I guess, because we were stalking that show, we noticed that about a few weeks ago, there was another little tidbit that was released that he was released from Guantanamo was on his way home to Morocco. Yeah. And so I don't know if you're able to talk about that at all. Sure. I'm assuming you've got some stuff in production probably, but what was that?
Is there a follow-up
Maybe
episode?
Not, yeah.
We want to. So basically what happened, I'll tell the story of the thing first, and then I'll tell sort of where we are, which is that we've been hearing rumors for a long time that he was going to get out. And so much of him being stuck in there was about the political wins, you know? And it was about Trump saying, I don't want to let anybody out. He let one guy out, but like it was, anyway, whatever. Abdul Latif Nasser was stuck in there in part because of Donald Trump, and the Secretary of Defense basically had to sign one piece of paper. It was like a paperwork thing. And he was stuck in because of this one piece of paper. And then President Biden came in, new Secretary of Defense, kind of wanting to make good on sort of like cash the check that Obama wrote to close this thing and to get these guys out. And so it was like, he's probably going to get out, but it's just a matter of time. But that's what they said in the Obama administration. So I was still like, I'll believe it when I see it. So we thought he was going to get out, and then we were hearing rumors, and it was like, I'll believe it when I see it. I'll believe it when I see it. And then finally, I heard from a pretty very credible source from the U.S. government saying, okay, he's getting out. Then we basically Susie and I, we stayed up like that whole night, like texting each other frantically, like, oh my God, where is he? And we were like texting with people in Morocco and here and there and this lawyer and this, and then we found out he actually landed, and we got confirmation from someone over there. And it was like, oh wow, he's really out. It was a shock. It was a shock. It was such a shock, because it seemed like it was this thing that for the 5 years prior, like it was an impossible thing. Like it was an impossible thing, and all of a sudden it just happened.
I was just going to ask, have you or anyone on your team been in contact with him since his release? Or
no. So he wasn't able to listen to the series while he was at Guantanamo, and so he. Among the things, like his lawyers were like, look, we're going to tell him to talk to you, but we don't know. It's up to him. And he's going to listen. He's going to want to listen to the series first to make up his mind. So he's basically been out for a few weeks. And from what I've heard, he's basically been on the beach with his family the whole time, which is like probably what I would do too.
Understandable.
But at some point I think he's going to get around to listening to the series, and I've sent it over my request that I want to interview him, and we'll see what happens. If and when he says yes, I'm just gonna jump on a plane. I was gonna do the thing where I was gonna jump on a plane just like when I heard he was getting out. I was just gonna jump on a plane and just go to Casablanca. But my sort of in doing that series and reporting the series, like I talked to many former Guantanamo detainees who it's really hard for these guys, and they were the most difficult sources I ever had, and they have so many kinds of PTSD and so many kinds of, and like what I'm doing is basically like I'm interrogating them, like and that's like exactly the most terrifying thing in the whole world to them. And so I didn't want to kind of horn in, and I didn't want to be the paparazzo like breaking through Britney Spears' bathroom window. So I was just like, look, I'm just going to let this guy get settled at home, and then I am going to hopefully interview him as soon as I can.
Right on.
Nice.
So also in 2020, a big year for you despite COVID, I assume, with the birth of your child and with all these incredible new projects. You released a science travel show on Netflix called Connected. So what was that transition like for you, kind of going from behind the mic to now in front of the lens? And I know Sofia kind of mentioned it earlier in terms of like how it came about, but what was that transition like for you?
It was sort of spellbindingly fun because I was so dumb again. Like I was just so dumb. I did not know what I was doing at all. It was really a jump into a whole new field. Like I would say this all the time, especially to our, directors of photography and stuff. Like, I'm like, you are teaching me how to use my eyes for the first time. Like I did not know. Like I've just never thought about any of this stuff, like except as sort of a passive consumer, and now actually having to, it's like a whole different ball game in a way, so it was really, and also just there's so many other things that were actually quite different from the way that I was used to working. So it was exciting for me. I mean, I've been doing, I still get joy out of what I do for audio. And there are certain incredible benefits to it. And I love the team I work with. But this was like, I was working with a whole bunch of new people on a totally new thing, in a new medium, with, like it was just new in 10 different ways. And it was just, that's so exciting. Like you just, I don't know, you realize 10 different ways, like how very dumb you are, like how you just don't get, like, I'll give you a very simple example, which is like, so, you see like, and I've said this one before, so maybe you guys have heard before, but like you see a host on a TV show, like walking through the desert, like alone, and like I really thought they were alone. Like I don't know why or how I thought that, but like they're not alone. They have like a huge camera crew, and they have like they have so many people around them. But like it's just all these like sort of all this TV magic. Like it was sort of demystified for me in real time. Like I was like, oh, you have to come with me. Of course you have to come with me. Like I can't just walk out in the middle of the desert by myself.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was
That's
just.
Awesome.
Anyway, I learned a lot, and I was really lucky because I was working with extremely professional people. The production company I worked with and Netflix, like they're really, really gifted, smart, professional, and personable people. Right
on. So you've had this like incredible career thus far, and I'm sure there's plenty more adventures yet to come. But is there a creative endeavor that you personally are most proud of?
Most proud of up until now? I think, I think those two projects that you mentioned, like the Other Latif series and Connected, they are for me, they were the two most difficult things, the two most ambitious things I ever did. And I did them at the same time, which is like it was, and at the same time as being like a parent. It was really, really it was a very difficult year, but I'm so proud of them, and I'm so proud of them in totally different ways. And I'm so like, they are two totally different things. It's funny. Like I remember someone being like, what is your brand identity? Like, who are you? These two things don't fit together. Like you do a bunch of stuff and it all feels kind of random. Like, I'm like, yeah, cause I like random stuff. Like that's, I don't know. That's all I got. But like, but those two projects, they're very different, but they're both kind of very, they come from deep inside me, and they took a lot of like heart and thought and sweat. But I'm really proud of them.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Awesome. They were like so breathtakingly cool. Like
thanks. And I was
binging all around.
I was just so lucky. Like, and I guess maybe this is the thing that you really kind of unlock when you get to a certain point in your career. I think which is that I don't know, you just get to work with like really good people who are on top of their game and who know what they're doing. And it's like, even if there's certain times where I'm figuring out what I'm doing, there's certain times where I know what I'm doing, there's certain times where I'm figuring out what I'm doing, but when I'm figuring out what I'm doing and just kind of blindly groping and stumbling along, like there are really really amazing people to sort of help you out and to support you. And I've been immensely lucky. I've been so lucky in my career. Like there's a giant scroll of names that I feel like I wouldn't be where I am or have even the tiniest fraction of opportunities that I've had without so many people.
Mm-hmm. So we like to end every episode with some rapid fire questions.
Do it.
That have nothing to do with your journey whatsoever, but tend to be some of the most incredible things anyway. So
Let's do it.
Awesome. All right.
Okay.
Sophia, take it away.
Okay. So first question is either your favorite play or the best play you've ever seen live. You can pick.
There's so many good ones. This is a hard one because I feel like I almost have to say my wife's plays because but okay, besides my wife's plays, if we're not counting my wife's plays, I really loved, there's been so many times when I just like walked out of a theater, like starstruck, like dizzy, or like weeping or something. Okay, I'm picking one. That's hard. Okay,
give us like top three. Just do maybe top three.
Okay,
would
there's
that
a
help?
play that I remember.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. Rapid fire.
Oh God, I've already ruined this segment. Thanks a lot, Latif.
Okay, number 2. What is your most regrettable purchase?
Oh, regrettable. Oh, there's so many. Regrettable purchase. There's a giant rainbow pool floaty kind of thing. We don't even have a pool. There's like that I walk by to get into my office, and it's
It's kind of amazing.
half my kids' toys I regret buying them. It just makes so much noise. They're so irritating, and I step on them, and they are little tiny Lego death traps.
Oh gosh, yeah, your poor feet. Okay, next is your most rewatched movie.
Most rewatched movie. I was watching. This is weird. I was watching. It's like a sad movie to be a rewatched movie. I was rewatching the documentary Hoop Dreams the other day, and I think it's like a fantastic
so
movie.
good.
And I always think about it.
I haven't seen it. What's it about?
Oh, it's about two boys in Chicago. Basically, it's like one of those documentaries. Like, do you know the 7-Up series where they like interview these kids when they're 7 years old, and then again when they're 14 years old, and again when they're Boyhood or something, where you're like watching kids grow up.
Linear.
And so this one, it's like that, but it's these two kids in Chicago who get recruited at a very young age to play basketball, and you kind of watch them grow up, and you see their two kind of fates and fortunes. Like they, and it's exciting, but it's heartbreaking, but it's one of the, I think it's one of the best documentaries.
That's a good. I was having a conversation with my buddies the other day about the best sports movie.
It's probably the best sports movie of all time.
Sophia knows it, but I'm like very biased towards Remember Titans. Yeah. That's up there for sure. Remember the Titans is definitely
the Titans.
But Hoop Dreams I forgot about.
Hoop Dreams, and it's a documentary, so we're comparing apples and oranges in a way. But to me, it's I think it's the best sports documentary that's ever been made.
Yeah, I would give an honorable mention to the Mighty Ducks.
Remember the Titans.
Oh, which one? I was just gonna say
Mighty Ducks. Which?
Mighty Ducks or Goon. I don't know if you've seen
Goon. Oh yeah, Goon. That's a Canadian movie too, right?
I don't know if it's Canadian because like it's got some good names, big decent
Paul Newman
size
in it, maybe?
No, it's got Liev Schreiber in it, and who's the guy from American Pie? Oh, what's his name? Sean William Scott.
Yeah.
Scott Michael Sean. Some 3-name word.
I just can see the poster, and he's like missing teeth or something.
Yeah. You did an episode on John Scott, right?
Yes.
Basically,
that's one of my favorite Radiolab pieces I've done. He was awesome. The sweetest guy.
That entire story is great.
Yeah, I can't take any credit for the story, but I was lucky to be. I was harassing him, and by harassing I mean like emailing constantly him and his agent to be like, "Hey, can you do an interview with me? Hey, can you do an interview with me?" Hey, for like a full year before he said
that. Sounds like me and you.
I apologize. I apologize for that. But the lesson is for both of those. It works.
That's great. It works. Okay, number four of our quote unquote rapid fire questions.
Oh God, it's ruined your whole segment. I've broke the show. I'm sorry.
No. We did one with Amir Suleiman. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's an incredible poet, and we were doing a rapid fire, and his one answer took 35 minutes.
Okay, great. Oh,
yeah.
Okay, so as long as mine's just 34, I won't be the worst.
Good.
Great.
You're good to go. So number 4, what's the most expensive thing you've ever broken?
Oh, my house.
Could be intentionally or unintentionally.
I feel like
did you like burn it down or?
I mean, I don't know. I just feel like we've bought it and it's like in great condition and like now everything's broken. And I'm the least handy person and like I'm like, what do I do with this thing? Like the sprinkler system, just leave it. I don't know what's gonna happen. Like my house. The answer is
that's
my house.
fair.
There you go.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the last and most popular question is, what is your favorite way to eat potatoes? So like mashed, scallop.
For sure, mashed.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Mashed. Yeah, mashed.
Yeah. Or like fries, chips.
I don't actually like French fries. I don't like potato chips.
Interesting.
I like mashed potatoes. I like pierogies too.
Pierogies are good.
Right.
Yeah.
Pierogies are great.
Nice.
Do pierogies count in the potato
Yeah,
category?
bro.
No, that's stretching.
No?
That's okay.
If it's a potato-filled pierogi, which like all pierogies
most
are,
pierogies,
then
yeah.
But really, what do you enjoy out of that? You enjoy
It's like the mashed
cheese
potatoes
and
on the
sour
inside,
cream,
yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
Sure,
it's the mashed potatoes. Sikandar doesn't like potatoes, and so he hates this question.
I mean, it's true. Potatoes are overrated. Like they
100%.
They're for sure overrated.
100%.
For sure.
Oh my God, Latif made my day, dude.
Yeah, no, they're overrated. But like to be fair, mashed potatoes are good. But like
On repeat.
Yeah. Anyway, I just think French fries overrated. Potato chips overrated. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
I disagree. I would eat. They're my favorite food group in any way, shape, or form. So I am a potato, like physically. So
dairy,
like, don't
like you don't like you wouldn't rank dairy over potato.
Or like any like
sugar,
like bread,
yeah.
like
like
wheat.
steak.
Like
I maybe steak, but like otherwise, like no, a potato any day. Any day.
Wow.
Anyway.
Well, but it's a versatile. I'll give it that. It's a very versatile food.
Well, because it tastes like nothing, so you need something to like make it, have any sort of flavor. But
I mean, I'm with you. I'm with you.
But it without it, there is no substance. Like it is the foundation.
It is. Yeah.
I think a lot that's just agreeing with both of us.
No, it's because I do genuinely agree with both of you. I'm still a polite Canadian, even though I live in the United States.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And on that note, Latif, it was such a pleasure having you on, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
How can people find you and your work?
They can find me. I'm on Twitter. They can find me there, or they can listen to the podcast Radiolab, where I'm one of the co-hosts, and or they can find me on Netflix, which is another place they can find me. So one of those places that's where I live.
Right on. Thank you again. This
Thank
was
you
my
so
broken
much.
house. They could also find me in my broken house.
Perfect.
Where the sprinklers don't work. Not even for the pool floaty that's in the shape of a rainbow.
No.
Right on. Good stuff. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of The Halal Gap. Join us next week for our guest, Abdul Latif. The Halal Gap is a Mosquers production. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok by searching Mosquers Film Festival. Thank you to our sound and video editor, Arish Jamil, our tile artist, Narmeen Syed, and our producer, Asif Qureshi, who just recently was voted Edmonton's top 10 eligible bachelors who have a striking resemblance to Zayn Malik. On behalf of Sofia and myself, thank you for joining us. We'll catch you next time.